All right, it's that time of the year, Games of the Year 2021. And this year was a little rough for me personally. It's just a wild experience to have to go through all of these games and then, I have to actually pick out, which one was actually the best one. But I'm going to get straight up into it. My game of the year, which, unfortunately, the wins might have been taken from under me because It Takes Two. And the Game Awards 2021 actually chose that as its Game of the Year as well. And here I thought I was being unique and awesome and all that other good stuff. It Takes Two was probably the best co-op game that I've ever played. And I also just happened to play it with a wonderful co-op partner that was Crayson. And we just had a ton of fun with this game. It was beyond an exceptional co-op experience. We got to do so many different things in that game. It was beyond varied in its gameplay from moment to moment. When you go through that game and you play the first sequence and you're like, okay, I understand what this game's gonna be. We're gonna have 7-8 hours, whatever the time will be, 6 hours of this type of gameplay. But it wasn't that. It kept changing. And that was something that I've never really experienced in a kind of linear-ish game in that way. That on top of the co-op experience really elevated this game far above anything else that I played this year. It had fantastic mini games. Some of them I had to mash buttons, but I got through those. I lost like pretty much every single one of them because I suck at that, but I was working on it. I think the story also had some impactful moments. I don't think it was the best story in the world in terms of what could have been done, but it was a story that had very impactful moments and very memorable moments. And I think that's what make me appreciate the game a lot more as well, because whether or not it falters or not, it still delivered a story that I enjoyed, and at the end of the entire experience I was like, okay, I can get behind this. So It Takes Two is definitely my game of the year for games that I played in 2021 that came out in 2021. Absolutely fantastic game. I 100% recommend it to everyone out there. Now, for my favorite game played this year, this can be any game that I've just played in 2021. Doesn't have to release or anything like that. That one's gonna have to be Ghost of Tsushima. I was kind of surprised of how this game played out. It was one of the more enjoyable games for me because I enjoyed the world and the characters far greater than pretty much every other game that I've played this year, I believe. I'm really attached to, we'll just say, like old school Japanese samurai kind of stories. That era is such an interesting era that I don't feel gets a lot of attention nowadays. When I get to play a game that's in those eras and it's, I don't want to say historically accurate because, what do I know? But it really hit the points of what I would want out of the narrative of those types of games. And it also kind of touched upon a lot of really nice gameplay elements. And it had really cool characters. It felt authentic, I think is the best way I could put it. Nothing felt fake or manufactured. It felt very organic and authentic, and that's one of the things that really elevated the world, the characters, and like the setting of this game for me so much, and made it one of my favorite games that I've ever played, but my favorite game played in 2021. There were just so many fantastic moments, so many little things. There were so many little things that when I normally talk about games, I noticed all the little things that really poke and prod at you, and it's the things that you don't like, and they pile up, and eventually those become big things because there's so many of them. But with Ghost of Tsushima, there were so many little things that just kept piling up. It was a very awkward thing to experience because you don't get to experience that very much in games. Usually everything is just okay. But there were just so many cool little things like this, the ability to bow, or to clean your sword. It's just all these little things that are in the game, and they make the overall experience going through it that much better. I really hope that I get around to playing that game someday again in the future, maybe even trying out the multiplayer DLC as well. Maybe if the game comes out on PC, maybe I'll buy it again and see if I can play it with somebody. For my most disappointing game played in 2021, I have to regretfully say that this is going to be Shadowheart's Covenant. I can't really fully explain how disappointed I was in this game. Shadowheart's 1 it started off being extremely creepy, but it wasn't scary. And that's something that I grew very attached to for that game. And it made that game a much more improved experience for me than I ever thought. Because, I don't play scary games, but this game wasn't scary. It was creepy, and it leveraged that creepiness, and it did creepy things. And I thought that was very cool and very unique. But when I went over to Shadowheart's Covenant, it wasn't anything like that. Shadowheart's 1 was rated M for mature. Shadowheart's Covenant is rated T for teen. And it really feels like they fell into that rating for the game. The story, the characters, the writing, the world building, the pacing, it all just felt lacking to me. But what really did excel in that game was the combat and the overall gameplay in it. It improved upon Shadowheart's 1 without a shadow of a doubt in almost every single area. Added so much customization, so many options. It was a phenomenal gameplay experience to actually go through. And I really wish that they were able to keep the story the way I would have wanted it to go, or at least at the very least just keep the tone of the creepiness, because that's what made the game unique for me. And I can understand why they would want to go for the T rating. It just didn't work for me. So Shadowheart's Covenant has to be the most disappointing game that I played in 2021. For my honorable mentions of favorite games played in 2021, in no particular order, of course, I'm going to go with The Outer Worlds for my first choice of not being in order. The Outer Worlds was a recent game, so it probably gets a little recency bias for me, but I really like Western JRPGs, or, Western RPGs, that do the choices matter approach and actually make them matter. I felt like I went through this game and I had to think through a lot of the choices that I was making and think through a lot of the people that I was talking to and either making allegiances or betraying people. And I think this game put me in a lot of situations where I had to think about the next step instead of just thinking about what's going on in that conversation right then and there. And what I really enjoyed about this game, other than that, is that the gameplay itself also lended itself to helping me out. I found a play style when I was making my character, and I was like, that could be pretty fun. I have no idea what any of these things are, but that could be pretty fun. And it took a while for that play style to manifest, but once it did, I felt empowered. And I knew immediately where I wanted to go with my build and how I wanted to approach certain situations. And really, that game just kind of surprised me and, came out of nowhere. I didn't know what to expect out of it other than to be a shooter type game. But I found myself really intrigued by the story. I found myself intrigued by a lot of characters. And I just had a ton of fun with it. So Outer Worlds was just a very fun Western RPG. My second honorable mention is going to be a Monsters Expedition. Kind of strange to put a puzzle game as one of my favorite games that I've played in 2021, but some puzzle games don't get the structure right. Some puzzle games, they go up and down in what you like and what you don't. They try different things, and they sometimes cross genres. They experiment a lot, and that can really affect how you enjoy the game. But a Monsters Expedition was very consistent for me. I enjoyed that it was extremely simple, but everything that you're doing can be complex, if that makes any sense. You know, just pushing over a log to cross over to someplace is a very simple action. But then you get into situations where you're adding in 2 or 3 or 4 more logs. Then maybe you're adding an extra island on top of that. And suddenly all the choices that you're making multiply. And so it's a game that, while it's very simple, it starts progressively ramping up to something more complex. And you're adding like rocks on the island, other sorts of obstacles that you have to get by. And it just became a wonderful game that, even though it was simple, it just made you think. And then there's these little side objectives that were very challenging and really made you think, but were very rewarding, in my opinion. So, Monsters Expedition is probably one of the better puzzle games that I've ever played. And I would 100% recommend to any person that enjoys puzzle games to give it a shot. I think it's reasonably priced, and you'll get more time out of that game than you'll think you got. Because let me tell you, I was expecting to beat that game in like 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. I got about triple of that, and I left some things out. So there you go. For my third honorable mention, probably no surprise, but it's gonna be Tales of Arise. Bars. I can definitely say that Tales of Arise is probably, I don't want to say definitively yet, I haven't gone down the list of the Pantheon, but it is probably the best Tales of game that I've ever played to date. Its combat was really nice. It was really nice change of pace from some of the older Tales of games. It was modernized in a good way. The story really got me thinking. I am a person who loves to make predictions, and I really feel like Tales of Arise was one of those few games that would add a small kernel of information about the story, and it would change the way I thought about that story, and it would open up new possibilities of predictions from me. And so it always kept me thinking, always kept me second guessing what is actually going on. And I really think that it lived up to its potential of getting me to figure out what's going on. And at the very end, I'm just like, holy crap, like this actually happened. So I was really impressed. I think a lot of the changes to the Tales of formula were for the better. And I think this is a fantastic direction to take Tales of games. I really liked pretty much every single character, if not every single character that was involved in the party. I think the dialogue was pretty well done. And so Tales of Arise, for me, was taking the series in a new direction. And I think in most cases, this is a risk that doesn't work out, but Tales of Arise actually does make it work out. And so I think that's why it probably gets elevated above all the other ones, because you guys took a risk and it worked. So good job on that. My final honorable mention for favorite games played in 2021 is Eldest Souls. I mentioned that I played the demo of this game a while back. I don't remember what year it was, 2020, 2019, something like that. It fascinated me a great deal. It was a boss rush game, like Dark Souls basically, but without any of the trash mobs or without any of the nonsense basically. All the frustrations gone. All you have to do is run to the boss and retry them all the time. You know, no more run backs. I find myself in a position of, I really don't want challenge in games, but this is a game where I enjoyed the challenge and I enjoyed being able to pick up on details and then execute my plans to counter those details that I find in the fight. There were many moments where I would encounter a fight and just be surprised by a new move that I just didn't see before, or enemies that just weren't following the same pattern that they would in 2 or 3 other attempts. There were some really well done fights, and it was honestly one of the better games that I've played this year, bar none. It's what I would want out of a Dark Souls game. You know, I just want to fight really cool and challenging bosses. It's one of the few instances where I want to be challenged. I think that's what really makes Eldest Souls a wonderful game for me. And you know, on the topic of this too, we actually got It Takes Two is pretty much an indie game, you know? Like, we got 3 indie games going on this one. I'm starting to become a indie connoisseur of some manner of whatever is going on. You know, It Takes Two, A Monster's Expedition, Eldest Souls. We had Fae Tactics last year. This is getting a little crazy. For ending this off, for my most anticipated games of 2022, let me just say that there's not a lot of games that are coming out in 2022 with a confirmed release date that I haven't already mentioned that I'm interested in and that are on my radar. 2022 seems like a very stacked year for game releases, as it seems like we're moving back into a normal era of development. But at the same time, it's like, you know, we're still missing a bunch of release dates on games that are on my radar. So I only have one anticipated game, and that's Project Triangle Strategy. Played the demo of this game, thought it was great. Had some technical or mechanical issues that I would have liked fixed, but overall, I think this game is going to be fantastic. The story will probably be mediocre, but honestly, what tactics game or JRPG out there doesn't have a mediocre story, you know? Shout out to Tales of Arise for not having a mediocre story. I think what I want out of this game is basically what it's already given me. It has a pretty cool take on the tactics genre, and it has a pretty cool approach on how it wants to do things, and I think the graphic style is really going to push this game farther than most other tactics games can possibly go. So I think those are some pretty nice selling points, and as long as they get their characters right, and as long as they get their systems in a good spot where having classes isn't a detriment and leveling up those classes isn't a detriment, we could be in a really nice spot. We can have a top tier game right there. So I'm greatly looking forward to what Project Triangle Strategy. I'm still really surprised that they're keeping that name, by the way. Or I guess they got rid of the project and it's just going to be Triangle Strategy. You know, first we got Succofu Octopath Traveler, which, you know, like in hindsight, it's an alright name, I suppose. But Triangle Strategy, I don't know if I'm behind that one. But yeah, that's my Games of the Year 2021. That's going to wrap it up for me for today. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. See you on the next video. Peace.